Welcome, everybody, to the Enough to Keep Going podcast. This is episode number 13, lucky number 13, and we are recording on Tuesday, September 12th, 2017. I'm your host, Osiris Prime, and tonight we have a jam-packed episode. We have our topic of the week, of course. We're going to be talking about games. I know that's a nice teaser that I put there. Also, we're going to be talking about our playlist, what we've been playing the last week. But first, let's introduce our co-hosts. First up, Mr. I guess, please, Stamos. I like to pick on him first because he's trying to do stuff in the background. How you doing?
Good. We've got like regular cast members and volunteers, and Joseph Malazzi just retweeted out that our show is live, so love that guy.
Oh, nice. Thank you, sir.
We're not even talking about Dark Matter tonight.
We just did. There you go. Actually, I was listening to another podcast this afternoon, actually, and they brought up Dark Matter. I was like, oh, that's too bad that, things happened the way they did. But, hopefully, he gets some more stuff going out there. So we'll see.
Okay. Prime is fired as host. DBQ, you're in. He's listening to other podcasts and not all the podcasts on the E2KG network channel.
I listen to every podcast that I don't want to get spoiled on. So I haven't listened to it. I don't want to get spoiled. I like to go in fresh.
No, I have that. We'll call him my brother-in-law, because they're millennials, all in this age of like we don't do marriage craziness. But
oh,
he's watching Dark Matter, but he doesn't want to watch our podcast until he gets caught up. So I get it.
Exactly. That's what I'll do. I promise. I do watch the old shows that I'm not on though, so I do watch those.
Cool.
But we also have one Mr. DBQ Hams coming in at the last minute, filling in spot number 3. DB, how's it going?
I'm good, yeah. Whether it's a lucky number 13.
Or did you may have just hit your mute, DB.
Yeah, I don't hear you. Oh, we'll keep going for now. We'll see.
Oh, did I cut out? Yeah,
you cut out for a second.
Okay. Well, I told you how terrible you were for not listening to the rest of the podcast.
See, that's what happens when you speak ill of me.
I know. See,
the internet knows, and they just cut it off.
He's got his hands on the mute. Oh no!
What
DB,
I thought was
you
funny,
muted it by mistake.
What I thought was funny was your slight baseball reference about him sliding in, and I was like, well, he has been playing MLB 17 or 18 or whatever. Maybe he's continuing his campaign.
Yep, that's right. Finally, moving over to the American League, the National League, so I can pitch and hit at the same time. So
always fun. All right, gentlemen. So we got our topic here today, talking about games that are remade of a sort, not necessarily like a reboot or like a total remake, but more so of maybe an idea or concept within a game that gets kind of redone, or possibly something gets changed. There's obviously different ways that can happen. So I don't know. I guess, Cleese, do you want to jump in here and kind of head this up?
Sure. I might even be able to just straight up read the ad copy that's posted.
I guess, Cleese, do you want to?
Well, with the episode. That means less work for me. So, can I do this in my radio voice? I don't know that I really have a radio voice, but games are often remade, or more specifically, I should say, game concepts. And it is often via different means. No, that's not a good radio voice. While it's often done in a sequel, it might be more interesting to take a look at the different models and methods of a do-over. What game do-over mode do you prefer, if any? Is there one model of remaking that you value more? Is there a model that, when applied, makes you more excited about the potential? So what this topic is all about is the way in which games and game creators kind of reimagine or recreate themselves. For those of you who like pop music, and you may not think it, but I actually don't think that pop music is the devil. But you look at great music artists, right? Prince, Madonna, Lady Gaga. I won't say. I should have stopped the great music artists with Prince, but I'll just say other stars in that genre, right? There's often a discussion around those stars, those what I call entertainers, right? They're not necessarily great singers, but it's the whole like stage presence and show. And what characterizes a lot of those entertainers is that they routinely remake themselves through different points in their career, right? They're kind of one persona for a decade, and then when the decade shifts, right, then they reimagine themselves. Their music is different. They change their appearance, and so on and so forth. And this is I was trying to angle in on something similar in gaming, and this is the topic here is around games that are a thing, and that via these different modes, right? So via the big, huge patch do-over, at some point after launch, remaking yourself via the sequel, the all famous, we were all members of a studio that made this game, and now we've left that studio and different members of us have started this new studio, and we're going to make the game right. The 10-year plus do-over where the same studio did a game, and then 10 years later, they're like, we really didn't do that. So it's kind of akin to pulling a George Lucas, except it's good. And then also, I really want to hear Prime's take on this. The big update plus player stats reset, which all gamers love, right? I've worked so hard to build this Jedi Knight or to do whatever, and now you're going to wipe the slate clean of all my stats and restart us over in this kind of different framework. So those are the different methods I could think of. I'm betting that there are more. Discuss.
All right, let's go with the first one since you got it up there. The DLC. So you have some or I should say, big huge patch do-over, as you put it here. And you have DriveClub and Forza Motorsports 5. Just those two games I'm not really too familiar with, so maybe you can talk on those a little bit more. But there is a little game called Destiny. Yes, we know it, we love it. That obviously got in the first. No, I'm talking about the first one here. Obviously, the second one just came out, but obviously, it got the. It had little patches like I was going to say the Wolf Among Us, but that's not right. What was the DB? What's
House
the
of Wolves.
House of Wolves, right? And
Dark
Rise
Below.
of Iron, yeah.
Yep.
Dark Below. Those were kind of smaller patches. They really didn't do too much, but it was the kind of the bigger ones that kind of hit. I believe it was like a year later. The Taken King.
Yeah, I think the Taken King is a good example of that kind of big, huge patch do-over aspect, right? In the Taken King's case, not only did it add and flesh out a story, that it cleaned up a lot of systems in terms of kind of quality of life systems, but also some of the in-game currency leveling systems. There were a number of things where if you came to the game at that point, it was a much smoother process than if somebody who started it day one.
Yeah, and it did that, and for me at least, negatively, it kind of impacted just because I didn't get those other DLCs, so I was just a vanilla Destiny at the time, and Taken King, at least as the multiplayer part of it, it kind of wiped out some of the modes that I could play, which was kind of weird, I thought, and no one ever really said anything. At the time of launch, even before launch, even after the launch, they kind of talked about it a little bit, and then they're just kind of like, oh, okay, whatever, it's out, so just you got to deal with it, I guess. They didn't say that, but that's kind of how I took it, just because it was never really mentioned, and I just thought.
So I think you've hit upon one of the other ones that I didn't get on the list, and this is the silent do-over, right? And we definitely get this. We even get these in small increments where we're like one of the games I might talk about in my playlist, like Dirt 2, right? And there's a lot of this going on. It's a soft remake, but devs or pubs or somebody is going back into these old games and inserting 4K assets, right? So here you go, you boot up a game that's 8 years old, and amazingly, you hit the resolution options, and the last time you checked it, it was 1920 by 1080. Now, which was a bump for a lot of these games that were 720p, right? Now all of a sudden there's 4K resolutions in them. So sorry, I just wanted to throw that in. Go ahead. I apologize for interrupting.
No, I think that's that silent do-over piece. But the difference there, other than the Destiny one, is the free versus paid, right? The DriveClub Forza 5, right? Those were not necessarily paid to DLC to kind of reboot the game. They were big patches that came out, right? A similar example was, I was just looking back in my photos from last year, and I'm wearing a Recore hat for all of the 3 hours that I really enjoyed Recore. But right, so that just came out with a definitive edition at the end of August, which was free to everybody that still actually owned the game, which added in the final creature, which streamlined a few systems and collecting aspects, and it was again free for everybody rather than a DLC. Or I think the patch aspect, No Man's Sky got another nice PR and press bump in the middle of August with its first year anniversary when they released story mode, and they did some other kind of quality of life and updates there. But then the difference, and from what you're describing, Prime, is that you would, if you own those games, you didn't have to pay for it. In your case, you paid for the original game. They did the do-over patch, but that patch came in the form of a $40 DLC.
Right, correct. So, and I think Gray had mentioned this too. Excuse me. There's some other like strike. I don't know if it was strike weapons or just other things that got kind of nerfed or just got blown away, I guess. So it was just weird, just the way the whole thing happened, and it just no one really ever said anything. I think that was just like the one thing that really bugged me about that kind of do-over, if you want to call it that. So it was just, I don't know, it just kind of soured me. And like, to be honest, I don't know if I'm even gonna get Destiny 2 at all, just because I don't want that same thing to happen. Because I'm not a big DLC guy, I don't buy a lot of it, so it's kind of no point.
Sure. Well, I think the difference there, and part of maybe what gets communicated maybe a little better this time, is the reality of it being closer to a shared world, an MMO type of experience, where if you're not playing the most recent DLC for World of Warcraft or the Knights of the Republic, right, that you get left behind in those cases, and what can you do or can't you do? So, but right, if there's not, I think one of the other the other piece, the sequel do-over, right, that idea of here's the, as you talked about.
Oh, I think you lost his mic again.
Yeah, we lost you again, DB.
You cut out again there after you said sequel. I think he's having some technical difficulties.
Might be,
I'm really having some mic troubles tonight, guys. Sorry about that.
Now you're back.
Okay. So yes, so I went on this long diatribe. No, right. So I think really it's the sequel do-overs, right? That Destiny 1.5, Destiny 2, as some people are comparing it to, but there are other examples of this. And then I think the challenge on a sequel do-over is exactly what you're experiencing right now, Prime. Is you've been burned by that franchise, and what's your tolerance level? What's going to entice a player to come back to it, to give it another try, or how gun shy is a player going to be with that franchise? I think the EA, rightfully so, has kind of put the brakes on and not done any Mass Effect Andromeda DLC, and it's kind of shelving that, right? That what's that next game in the Mass Effect series, and how long do they let it sit on the shelf before they do that kind of franchise reboot or do-over, because it's people have been burned by that. Are there other sequel kind of reboots? Not really reboots, right? Because that's not what we want to talk about, right? This is not Devil May Cry or Tomb Raider, or these are kind of the do-overs. These are this is what we hope to do, but we were waiting for the technology. I think it sure seems like we saw more of this in earlier generations, right? Where you would see a initial franchise on a 32-bit console moving to a PlayStation 2, and the sequel became bigger and better because they were able to do more things. It feels like we're not seeing that as much now.
Well, I want to walk back one or two steps now that I'm getting done sending out the social media. So, so a few things, right? So we talked about the big patch, massive patch reimagining, and we also talked about the silent recreation, right? And I guess one of the things that bugs me is that, to connect it to your point, DB, about how do you incentivize somebody to go back in, a lot of times those things happen and they're not big news, right? The media doesn't focus on them. They don't get a lot of attention. And I harken back to in the spring when I did the DriveClub revisit, which I hadn't bothered to check out. Now Forza, and when I say reimagine themselves for Forza 5, I'm talking mainly about how when it came out, it was such a micro-transaction assault, right? And they nickel and dimed you for everything. And I think because the model specifically was you would pay for the DLC cars, and then you would still have to pay in-game currency to then access them, which frustrated everyone to no end. And then they cleaned that up, and it was kind of a great game. A big difference for me then was I didn't bother playing Forza 5 until they had done that update. So I'm much more engendered to that as a piece of the franchise, and I don't think of it as a bad chapter in the history. Same thing with DriveClub. DriveClub came out and they microtransactioned the heck out of you. It was very analogous to the Killer Instinct model on Xbox One, which it's a toss-up between whether that or the whole Gran Turismo thing is the thing that makes me the angriest when I have to bring them up as a topic. I think it's definitely the Killer Instinct one because it perpetuates to this day. I'm like, just make the game free or sell me the game. But they have 59 different shades of gray in between those two ends of the spectrum. And DriveClub was sort of the same way, but then they didn't necessarily make any more content free. They just simplified the model, and they said, look, buy this, and you get all of this. And then 90% of what you're going to run into through the course of just naturally traversing the campaign is clearly going to be either available for you in the base game or available for you with the season pass or whatever. So I just wanted to bring those up as interesting recreations that definitely color people's optics on them differently.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I can kind of see what they're going with on Killer Instinct. Maybe, basically, the way I think about it, the way I see it is maybe that was more for the people who have played it in the past. Now, granted, Killer Instinct was, well, I don't know, 10, 15 years ago. Maybe not that long, but the original, or I think Killer Instinct 2 was the last time they had made a game. And when the new one came out, maybe they were thinking, all right, let's just put them piecemeal out there. People who really maybe they just played one character all the time. They played Cinder, or I don't think he was even in there yet at that point. But one of the other characters, they just want to concentrate on him. Why do they want to pay for the whole game? I could see it that way if you're looking at it like that. I mean, that kind of makes sense. But I mean, I guess it's just me.
I'll label that under my current favorite cliche, particularly in the workplace these days. I empathize. I do not sympathize. I get where you're coming from, but I'm not changing my decision.
Well, I wasn't trying to change your decision. I was just trying to get the other side, trying to play devil's advocate. That's all. But and another thing, actually, now that you're mentioning, so you mentioned the big, huge patch, but how about the incremental patches that you see, throughout a game series? And one that kind of springs to mind right away when you're talking just now was Titanfall. How it kind of was just, kind of the base game. You just throw it out there. It's only online. They never added any kind of story, really. I mean, there was a story mode, but it was very small, almost kind of Battlefront-esque, I guess. It was just kind of a thing you kind of play through real quick. But they added. You can customize a little bit more, I think, on your Titan on the original one, and they added like the Horde type mode, which I can't remember what it's called right now. I'm sorry, but to those developers,
Frontier Defense, yeah,
Frontier Defense. Yep. So you have those type of games too that kind of add up eventually. It makes a great game. It's not just one big huge thing, but it's kind of just little things along the way. And that was just one that came to mind. I don't know if you guys can think of something else that was kind of like that.
Well, it's weird because for me, I feel like that's what my Destiny experience was. Right, so I checked back in on the game, I think after the first DLC released, and I didn't really find it that much different. And then and actually it was like the step back that you and Gray talk about, right? But but that didn't impact me because I hadn't progressed that far where that step back really impacted me. Then I heard as the additional pieces of DLC got layered in, that it just fleshed things out more and more, and by the time the final DLC dropped, the game was whole. Well, that's when I went on my big rush, right? So like from October of last year, wrapped around through the summer, and so again, a big part of my Destiny experience was this more fully fleshed out game that I knew had been fortified via these incremental advances. So
I think that's a nice combo with our topic last week in terms of kind of day one purchases, right? Of being out in front and being in the zeitgeist as that's going on. But the experience that you're getting as a day one, week one, or even, half of a year one player is definitely different for a lot of games than what you're describing, Zeus, right? What you came back to 9 months, 18 months later, it was a very different game than from somebody who put down $60 at the very beginning.
All right. So, DB, I know you were trying to move us on to the next sub-bullet.
No, well, I still think that there's an interesting discussion to be had there about at what point, at what point does that franchise, get rid of its goodwill? What does it have to do to get you to come back for that soft reboot or that hard reboot, right? If it's free, maybe it's a little easier. I know that, I was a day one Battleborn purchaser for PC. I really enjoyed it. I fell off from the game very quickly. But I would go back every once in a while when a new character would drop. But then I really went back to it when they did their big kind of free unlock that they did this past fall, where all the characters were available. You didn't have to grind to unlock anybody, right? That was, but it also got press, right? I think what you're talking about, Zeus, is when a game is kind of pushing those assets out or those changes out, and it's not getting picked up. How does an average gamer come about that and discover those changes into an experience that might be something that they were hoping for in the first place?
Well, in a lot of cases, I feel like, especially for me, it's the randomizer, right? It's either randomizer, rainy day, I think, is a big part of it, right? You go back and revisit something because it's a 3-day weekend, or it's crappy weather, or you break your leg, so you're laid up and you got nothing else better to do, right? All these rainy day things. And word of mouth, unfortunately, because a lot of times, like I said, the media doesn't. Or maybe you watch this podcast, right? And we're not mainstream media, so we bring it up, and then you go back and check the game out.
Yeah, it's. I don't know. I don't even know. I'm just gonna move on. Let's go on. Let's talk a little bit more about the sequels. Well, speaking of sequels, once again, Titanfall. You have Titanfall 2. They refined it. You got the story mode. Obviously, they threw that in there. Or not, I was gonna say threw it in there, but they put that in there. Multiplayer is, well, it was actually kind of pretty different because they didn't have like the cards that you had on the first game when you're playing through. You had the different cards that gave you like different weapons and abilities and stuff. So, and you can trade out your or so you customize your Titans a little bit better now, and there's more weapons and stuff. Then they just kind of retooled it, and for better or for worse, that they redid everything. So I mean, it's sometimes they you just got to do that. And you have Mass Effect 2 on here now. I never played I'll play a little bit of the first one, but I never played the second or third one yet. So I was kind of just wondering.
I want to hear this argument, Gray,
Yeah.
Zeus, because I am, having played through all the Mass Effects, those are two different games. The first one is very much more of a turn-based BioWare type of RPG, where Mass Effect 2 becomes a whole lot more action-y. Is the argument here that was the direction that they were hoping for, or it was a 90-degree turn for the series, and that's the do-over?
Yeah, the do-over is just it was a big swerve, right? So like you mentioned, in my recollection of Mass Effect 1 is not perfect, and I didn't play Mass Effect 2, so I put this in here mostly based on hearsay, but Mass Effect 1 to me, in my memory, plays a lot more like Knights of the Old Republic. And then Mass Effect 2 is, like you said, it's more of a third-person action game. So I didn't have a huge religious ideological crusade behind that. It was just
no. I think it's an interesting, right? And that's a different tack and approach than like the Titanfall 2 model, or what we'll see this fall, right, with Battlefield 2. Where we've talked on this podcast about the lack of depth in the original, and what it was eventually by the time that all the DLC came out, what it was. Battlefront 2 should be much more robust. And my mic is probably cutting out again. So, but there are some other sequels out there that do change the gameplay. I think Dragon Age 2 is in that same, right? There's another BioWare aspect where that gameplay changes, different drastically in terms of how that approach happens. But yeah, I think the sequel part, then it becomes a question of, is it really a do-over? Is it a new direction, or that the developers kind of playing around with what could be in terms of expanding that brand and that franchise?
Well, and it plays a little differently too when the do-overs, when the sequels are, as far as the devs know, are going to continue, right? So when you're doing an annualized series, or even just or like a racing game series where maybe it's not every year, but maybe it's every 2 years, or maybe even the years are indeterminate, but you know that you're going to make another one, right? In particular, this year with the Dirt series, which was originally labeled the Colin McRae series, right? A lot of people's complaints with Dirt 4 is that Dirt Rally was a hardcore rally racing sim, right? I mean, it looked realistic. It started you off in the 60s. You drove old cars for a long period of time before you were allowed to touch the new cars. And then Dirt 4 is a little bit more in the direction of Dirt 2 and Dirt 3, and people have lost their minds, right? But I'm like, but Dirt Rally is a great game, and it's still very playable, right? It's like it's not like because Dirt 4 is out, you have to stop playing Dirt Rally. And then I'm kind of like, why can't you just have both? And Madden has gone back and forth between that, on some years. Some years it's been more extreme, like it's literally a different feel of a football sim, because the passing radically changes or the running game radically changes. But yeah, I think it's fair game, right, to recreate yourself in the do-over, and when you're, like I said, when you're in that situation where you're going to be making another one, I would think that you would have more play and more flexibility, and more of an opportunity to experiment, and people maybe shouldn't be as surprised at the differences from year to year.
I think that the next one that you mentioned up, right, the idea of branching off, or the former devs at a studio go off and make a like game, in the genre of, I think that is a direct.
Whoop, you cut off again, DB. DB. Oh, there you go.
Oh, that's good, because I actually just lost my voice there for a minute. So
that's good.
It's like, it's a good thing I'm down to a pack a day. Okay. So, but what I was going to say is that I think there's a big through line from the sequel that swerves to the next topic, or the next genre type of, here's a game in this style that's made by former devs or fans of a series, right? Like, I think you could make the argument that, Sonic Mania is a do-over for all the 3D Sonics that have existed for the last 20 years, right? Or something like Pillars of Eternity by Obsidian is a do-over for, or not, it's that going back to that Black Isle type of Baldur's Gate type of gameplay. Or in your example, right, the spiritual successor, the Torchlight 2 aspects of, Torchlight 2 is Diablo 2 versus Diablo 3, and what gameplay, it's people who are passionate about a certain series, but maybe object to the direction that it went. I think there's a good connection between those, there's a split there at some point.
Yeah, there's a couple other examples. Sorry, Zeus. I just want to throw out there. You had some of the X-Rare guys doing Yooka-Laylee, which was kind of a successor to Banjo-Kazooie, and Banjo 2 and all that. And then Mighty Number 9, which is from the creator of Mega Man. Not granted, it's up to debate if these are great games, or if something kind of fell off when these are released. But I mean, it's they're in that same vein. Mighty Number 9 is, I mean, it's Mega Man basically, just refitted in different skin basically. And same thing with Yooka-Laylee, from what I've heard. I haven't played it myself, but I mean, they're basically saying it's Banjo-Kazooie. So for better or for worse, I mean, these these developers will go out there and do these games. So should be it's fine.
Well, here's a mind blower. Uncharted, in my mind, clearly reimagined the vision of Lara Croft, and then Tomb Raider reimagined the vision of Uncharted, right? So it all came full circle, right? I mean, those two last Tomb Raider games are radical departures from the previous Lara Croft design, and the direction that they could have elected is they could have said, hey, those guys, Facebooked my Snapchat, right? Where in terms of Facebook snapping up all of Snapchat's implementations and just basically blatantly copying them. Uncharted kind of took that vein and ran with it. Eidos could have definitely said, hey, let's take what they did and refine that, and they didn't, right? They made radically different games. Man, something's going on with Hangouts tonight. I know if I'm glitching and I'm on a Fios connection, then something's up.
Oh, you seem fine to me.
Yeah, there was a momentary pause there for some reason.
Okay.
Kind of scared me. So one other thing I'll throw out is, it used to be that a lot of this discussion was also highly generational in terms of the consoles, right? Like, I would, so I played Project Gotham Racing. So how'd it go? I didn't play the first Project Gotham Racing because I was like, that looks sketchy. And then I played PGR2. And then that bled over into the next console, right? PGR3 and PGR4. Forza, I didn't play on the Xbox One again because it looked kind of sketchy to me. And I actually didn't play Forza or Forza 2. Forza 2 was also on the original Xbox, right?
That I can't say for sure. I've never played those.
So I
Maybe
think
DB knows.
I don't think it was. I think it was on 360. Was it?
Oh, okay.
I'm gonna look it up.
Okay, so DB's gonna fact check. So I onboarded at Forza Motorsport 3 because I felt like that's where the series hit the stride where I was looking to participate, right? So,
Zeus is right. It is original Xbox.
Okay, so and mostly it was because I didn't feel that the Xbox, that original hardware set, could really pull off what I would want out of a Forza game, so I waited for the next hardware set. Funnily enough, that's kind of a bad approach to take these days when console generations may last, 7 to 9 years. So, so you may want to just get in and participate, but it's definitely interesting when that do-over is under the aegis of a hardware change out as well. And it'll be very interesting to see how Xbox One Scorpio impacts that new cycle.
Yeah, and that kind of, I guess it ties into one of the other bullet points here, the do-over after, 10 plus years. Obviously, Grand Theft Auto was the top-down kind of, same kind of gameplay, I suppose. But, and then it turned into 3D, and you can go all around this huge city, Grand Theft Auto 3 at the time, but obviously now we have 5, but, same concept in Duke Nukem, kind of Doomish clone, if you want, just reimagining the character, maybe giving him a little more personality than the Doom guy had. I don't know if the guy had a name. Well, maybe he does now, but I just call him the Doom guy. So, you have those types of games that are, you have that, well, like you said, like a generation. Well, this is more than just, maybe not so much a cycle, a console cycle. It's just, I don't know, for some reason they took, 10 years or, whatnot to redo it. I don't know if you guys had any other thoughts on that. Nope.
Yeah, no, I mean, I'm trying to think of other games that I think that plays into that generational piece, right? Like what was possible on the PlayStation was not a realistic kind of 3D world to walk and drive around in. But once the PlayStation 2 happened, Grand Theft Auto 3 was technologically possible, right? So that allows for that kind of do-over, that change in vision or realization of vision as well.
Yep. And actually, you can put Duke on there twice, really, because he had Duke Nukem Forever, which that was maybe some other kind of development problems that took him so long to get up that last game that came out. But
yeah, just because you realize your vision or do a do-over doesn't mean that do-over was any more successful than your last original product as well. So yeah, I think the last thing that I'm thinking about with all of these is really, what is there a style? Is there an approach that makes us more likely to go back and visit it? As Prime's saying, he may hold off from Destiny 2. As Zeus is talking about getting some really nice surprises with Dirt and other racing games as things have been patched in. Is there a model that makes us as gamers and players and fans more likely to stick with the franchise or gameplay style?
Yeah, I'll jump right in on that. For me, it's I'm just going to check the list one more time. it's the big one is the big huge patch, right? And I don't, and not the one that drops like the week that the game releases, but the one that's like the devs see the game in the wild for a few months, they go, something's not tilted in the right direction, right? And they drop this significant patch that really recreates the game at its core. And I like that because it makes me feel it's akin to the hardware purchases, right? I guess because I like the same thing. I love when I buy a piece of hardware that I really want to love, but it's just not what I want it to be. And then they release a big software update, and all of a sudden it feels like I've gotten twice my return on investment, right? And that's the way I feel about games with the big, huge update is, you buy a game for $60. It's not what you want it to be. I guess it's most preferential when it is at least a little bit what you want it to be. And then on top of that, you get this big patch that kind of recreates it. So, and sometimes gives you free content. Good example is Fast RMX, which is the Wipeout-like game on the Nintendo Switch, is about to release a 1.3 version update tomorrow at the Nintendo, whatever it is, Treehouse or whatever event. And that update includes, in addition to all the stability and performance fixes, also includes some number of new tracks and at least one additional vehicle. And I'm like, so improve my game and give me extra content? Sure.
I think for me, it's hard because I was going to say sequel, the sequel do-over, but I almost akin that to the big patch because sometimes a big patch can make it, a brand new game. Obviously, like Destiny, which for me is actually not a good idea, but it kind of. I'm sorry.
Lost Legacy, a little bit, sort of, kind of.
Yeah. It's almost, I guess, like back in the PC days, where you had the what did they call it? It was the DLC. What they call it was almost like a sequel, but
expansion pack.
Expansion pack, yeah.
Okay, I was gonna say total conversion mod, but yeah, it's
not total conversion mod. Oh, those are good too. I mean, you could do that.
Ding, 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 ding. There's our nerd moment for the podcast.
We got it. I put all my DC comic characters in my total conversion mod so I could play with them in Freedom Force. So it's only funny because it's true.
But let's 10-second interruption, Prime. So sorry. That's a thing that should have been on the list too, right? Because in a lot of those cases, fans or some independent developer actually completely fixed a game. Falcon 4.0, inherently unstable, wouldn't run, frequently crashed when you landed the aircraft after the mission. Fans 4 or 5 years after the fact released this huge, massive update that completely corrects the vast majority of the stability problems. It's an entirely different game than it was when it released from Microprose back in the earlier. In the late 90s, early 2000s. Sorry, go ahead, Prem.
No, sorry. I was going to go on tangent myself because I was going to say, could you even say like the do-over by a different studio could be like a total conversion almost? Because I mean, they don't have the same essence. Obviously, like say if they were working for EA, they couldn't use Frostbite or something, but they can do maybe they'll have to make their own graphics and all that rebuild it or maybe use like Ubisoft's thing or something like that. So, it's basically the same game but skinned over.
But I think there are real world examples of that, right? Did Telltale redo the LucasArts adventure games, the Monkey Island?
Yep. I think mainly just Monkey Island.
Okay, so that would be an example, right? It's a different development team. But they licensed the old assets and kind of redid the game.
Yeah. I think you could make the case, there's somewhere in there is, Bethesda and Obsidian in terms of Fallout and Fallout 3 and New Vegas, that is taking exactly that same engine, but handing it over to somebody else to see what they can do with it.
Yeah. And I totally lost my train of thought now. Now that we tangented out of the main goal here. I don't know. DB, go ahead if you want to say your.
No, I think.
What did you think was your best course of action here?
Yeah, I think the best course of action for fans is exactly what Zeus talked about, right? Is the big huge patch. It is It's the same reason that I have continued to hold on to my disc-based copy of No Man's Sky, because I know eventually it's going to be a game that I really am interested in seeing what it is, and it got to that point eventually. I think that is the ideal spot, because it, for those that have stuck with it or are willing to come back, there's a lot of game there. I think the challenge is that for people that put down a full price for a game, that what's their incentive. And I am curious to see how this discussion impacts early access games, right? Like, those are games that the experience that you're acknowledging is not going to be the same as it's going to be in 6 months from now or a year from now. You're kind of buying in, with that awareness. But, are you getting enough out of that game early on compared to what somebody who's coming late to it is? So I think this is going to be a continuing discussion as kind of the economics of development continue to shift, and things are not what they were back in the 90s and 2000s, where, as you were saying, Prime, you had expansion packs, right? You have incremental DLC versus box copies of big DLCs.
Yeah, and just real quick, Zeus, you had mentioned you wanted to get my opinion on, what was it, the last one, the player stat reset?
Yes, but I was figuring you could cover that in your weekly playlist.
Okay, because you mentioned Rocket League. I don't remember, did they reset their stats at some point?
They're about to.
Oh, are they? Oh, I didn't even see that. Okay, that's interesting. Okay.
Commence temper tantrum.
Commence. I'm dropping Rocket League. That's it.
There we go. That's a good segue there. Let's let Prime cry for a little bit, and
that's right.
We'll come back to him.
Let me cry right now, because I'll just jump into our playlist here. So obviously, like I had mentioned, I think I mentioned it last time that I had actually, or maybe I just mentioned on the news show real quick, I actually turned back on my Xbox One finally after like a month and a half of playing nothing but nonstop Switch. So jump back into Rocket League, and I just, it's not too bad for that, I guess, because I mean, I don't know if they're going to reset like what you've already unlocked. Like, if that's the case, that's kind of a bummer. But I mean, as far as like your level and stuff, I mean, that's cool. I'll just grind back up. I was going to do it anyways once I got on the Switch, so it's kind of all right, I guess. I mean, I'm just going to start over once the Switch version comes out. So now, did they mention like exactly what they're going to do in the game?
I'm not sure. So I'm bringing up the article now.
Okay.
It's going to take me a while to gloss over it real quick.
All right. Well, let me talk about my. I'll talk about the other game I've been playing on Xbox, which actually, oddly enough, was a game preview. A game that came out on the Xbox One. Excuse me. Was Ark Survival Evolved. That was finally released. I think it was like 2 weeks ago now, or a week and a half ago. And I did. You mentioned how you play it. It wasn't so much that the gameplay like totally changed or anything like that, at least as far as I can tell so far. But I stopped playing it at one point last year, or maybe the beginning of this year, because they were, obviously they're doing patches during the game preview, and it like totally wiped out like all my creations that I had done, or like one section of a creation that I had done, and I had like built up this huge house and it was kind of base and stuff, and it was like just totally gone when I logged back in one day. So I was like, you know what, I'm done for now. I'm gonna wait until the whole game comes out, and I'll jump back in. And actually, I've done that last weekend. Well, actually, a couple weekends ago. And I've been playing through it, and I'm having just as much fun as I did, the first time around. At least, hopefully, now it'll be, somewhat stable. I won't lose stuff, hopefully, and the servers seem pretty stable. Still, there was a weird thing back in the game preview, and I thought they had fixed it. But sometimes when you go to like start the game, or start a server, excuse me, it would kind of freeze on the loading screen. And I found out going through the forums that you had to like go into your Xbox settings, go offline, wait a few seconds, and then go back online, and then it would start up the loading process, which is like totally weird. But it's still doing that every once in a while. It doesn't happen all the time, but that's fine. I'm dealing with it. It's no big deal as long as I can get into the game at least, and my stuff doesn't get wiped out. So that's fine. I don't know, Zeus, did you find the article, or did you get through it? Yep, I think you're muted.
Yeah, sorry. Yes, I found a list of many of them, and then I didn't actually read any of them.
Okay. That's all right. You can send me the article, and or I could just look for it too.
Right.
I'll look through it just to see what. I'll cry about it next week. What they're going to reset. So other than that, those two games are the only thing I've been playing on Xbox One, and then obviously I've still been playing lots of Switch. I've actually bought 2 more games. I bought 2 Lego games. Lego City Undercover, which is actually a redo from I think the Wii U it originally came out on, and I think it came out on PS1 and Xbox One. I'm sorry, PS4 and Xbox One.
Yeah, it did. It came out. The re-release came out on Xbox One and PS4. How are the load times? Because I played it on Wii U, and that was a lot of waiting. I was assembling Lego sets during those load times.
It's actually kind of long. Now that you mention it, compared to the other games on the Switch, it's not terrible, but it does seem pretty long when you first get into the game. At least once you're in it, it seems to be a fine. But just that initial get into the game, and obviously it's kind of an open world game, so maybe I can give them a little bit of leeway. But I mean, it still does take kind of a long time to get in there. So, but yeah, it's been fine. I've been having fun with that. I've been playing that, and then I've also bought Lego Worlds. Which obviously, if you know me, there's a thing that I do.
So is this your second copy or third?
This would be all my second, because I got it on Xbox One and now I have it on the Switch. So, but I mean, it's pretty fun that I can take that kind of game, Minecraft-y type of game, even more nuanced than Minecraft, because you got all the little Lego bricks that all different size and shapes and stuff, and you can take that on the go. So that's pretty cool. So yeah, so I bought that. Was playing a little bit more of I forgot the name of the game now. I got so many games now that I'm trying to go through. It's that kind of Dynasty Warriors, Fate Extella, I think it was called, I believe. Been going through that a little bit more and just have no idea. Still have no idea what's going on in the story, but it's just fun to hack and slash my way through hordes of enemies, and I'll probably be picking up Fire Emblem Warriors when it comes out. I think within a week or two. That same vein, but from the makers of the Dynasty Warrior games and those type of games. So that should be fun. And I did partake in the last Splatfest that happened. So a little bit, it was kind of the tail end of it. But my team Flight, yay, it won. So there was that.
So Prime, the Fate game, is that a full price game? Because initially when you described it, it sounded like it was an indie game, but I've seen box copies for it as well.
No, yeah, it was full price, $60.
Okay.
$59.99. Yeah, and I only picked it up because I still had some credit on my account, so it was a little bit less, like $10 less or something. So, and that's pretty much it. I haven't touched Zelda for a while, unfortunately, or Minecraft or other games that I have on there. But I'm gonna have to start like rotating through, do like Zeus does, and just rotate through my games so they all get their fair share. But speaking of Zeus, it looks like you're playing some PS4 games and PC, a little bit of Switch. And I think you're muted because I don't hear you, but I see you talking.
Yeah, sorry. I got the hardware mute on the headset plus the thing. So this has been a return to my gaming first time management schema. So this kind of goes back to the way things were when I first got out of the military. It was actually probably before I got out, but I had this philosophy that at night, once I got home from work, that like if you called me and I was gaming, your phone call had to wait, right? Leave a voice message, and I had this 2-hour block of time that was dedicated to gaming, and that was always the first thing I did when I got home. Obviously, a lot of things these days, like a lot of nights that I get home, like the first thing is something to do with the kids, right? Get their dinner ready or whatever. So I've recently been pushing that back to the fore, and I've had to give some things up, but I was kind of at a point where I had to question some of the labor hours that were going. Some of those other endeavors to not really get a whole lot done while looking at my backlog and constantly weeping. So I started off with Lord of the Rings: Shadow of Mordor on the PlayStation 4, and another reason I did this is because I have you guys have heard this before, I have a big problem that I switch systems and games sometimes so much that like certain games, like they don't stick if you only play them for 30 minutes, right? So a lot of this has been about trying to create some larger, singular, cohesive blocks of time excuse me, to really immerse myself in a given game for like a 6-hour block of time. So like I said, I played Lord of the Rings, Shadow of Mordor. Now, what's been impacting me the last few times that I've played this game is same thing. The game sessions have been so short, and this is a control scheme that I forget when I don't play the game like every week or every day. But this time I spent at least a full hour and maybe an hour and a half almost, and really re-immersed myself in the combat system, which better equipped me to go out and deal with some of these bands of orcs. So whereas last time when I played it, like I didn't pick the combat system back up and I just got killed. So I really had a lot of fun in it, and I took on some. This is a game where it's the most satisfying when you defeat a really large, sizable force, and feel like you are this real like combat ninja, right? That is able to take on 24 orcs and survive. So, and I play a little bit more of the story. I've had another penchant for problem with this game where I randomized so much that I frequently didn't get anything done in the game because I did one mission over in this one region and then another mission in that region down there and then another mission over here. So this session I really focused on, let me try and clear as many of the missions as I can in a single region before I worry about like crossing the border to go to a different region. Played a little Painkiller Black Edition in Quake 4. So again, these are older games on the PC. I think I may have been testing something when I played these. I can't even remember right now, but I didn't spend that long in them. Again, Painkiller is a game that has new assets that have been added to it, so it will scale up to 3186 or 3086 or I don't know. The 4K or near 4K resolution. So, and it looks good while playing it. So that was pretty cool. Then I played some Dirt 2 on the PC. Actually live streamed that this Sunday. So, and exported it. I split it in half, and I haven't gone back and taken a look at the shorter session yet. But it took me a long time to get that working. It's Dirt 2 came out in 2009, and it's still a Games for Windows Live game. And I thought that they had gotten rid of that, but that was actually Dirt 3. So if you're going to try and resurrect Dirt 2 and get it to play, I had to put a healthy number of workarounds in place. And I was up till 2 o'clock in the morning because when something like that is going sideways, I kind of refuse to let it go until I figure it out, for fear that when I come back and troubleshoot it, like after, hours of sleep, then I won't remember what I troubleshoot and kind of eliminated the night before. So I did get that running. Super huge, fun challenge to make that happen, and then live stream that a little. Then I kind of rounded things up on the Switch with a quick session of Legend of Zelda, which went pretty horribly. Although I did realize that, again, I was so fixated in that first tower, thinking that all of the shrines were the same color, and I didn't get that they're not. So I've spent probably an hour in that game between a previous session and this one, where I've been like, but I've already been to that shrine, or that object should be it, but it's not actually a shrine, because I didn't realize that shrines can have different colors. They don't all have to be blue. And then the thing that I probably spent the most time in and had the most fun with was Fast RMX. So I spent about a total of 5 hours, 5 hours and a quarter in Fast RMX, back and forth, like taking breaks and stuff, because it can get a bit grindy at times. But yeah, it was really awesome. And so yeah, that's all I've been playing. I took the Switch on the go for the first time. First time it's actually been out of the house. How did that go? It went good. With my impaired vision, I'm definitely going to need to experiment with it a little. So you can see now it still doesn't have the. Did it turn on? I did not intend for that to happen. It still has the Joy-Cons off the side because I have the Joy-Cons packed in the bag. That's another thing I'll mention is I played with the regular Joy-Con grip controller. And man, I've forgotten how much a wonderful little controller that is. For that to be the controller that comes in the box with no add-ons, it really controls really well, and it actually feels good in the hand. I have to do some kind of digital gymnastics to get around the hand grip a little bit sometimes, but all in all, I really like that controller. I think it doesn't get a lot of credit because we as gamers, we focus in on the fact that the Pro controller is so much better and it's concurrently so difficult to get. That's what people talk about, but yeah, the Joy-Con controllers, especially with the Joy-Con grip, are really solid.
Yeah, I find the with the grip, I find that controller, especially in like Zelda or Mario Kart, it's been very enjoyable. And I know that, I think that it fits well. It's comfortable. It's certainly, I guess I haven't played it that way on handheld mode, like taking it off and propping it up, but sitting in front of the TV with it, it's been great. Zeus, you were talking about the, being able to stick with the game long enough to remember its systems, right? To get back in. Mordor is definitely that way, right? Because of that Batman combat. But when I jumped back into Breath of the Wild this summer, it took me maybe the first night just to remember, how all those different, the different mechanics, like, okay, I got to swing, now wait, I gotta throw my weapon, I gotta do, how was that, getting back into Breath of the Wild for you? How was that in terms of kind of ramping back up?
It was pretty easy just because that session, maybe I didn't. Well, so the session picked back up in the shrine where you get the bombs. So those, and it's interesting. So those shrine challenges kind of are tutorials to onboard those new weapons. So I kind of dropped into that, and that was good. And I actually grasped how much maximum ammo I could carry of the bombs, because that would have been a very easy thing to overlook. But yeah, it wasn't that difficult for me, like I said, because I dropped in a mechanic tutorial kind of. And then, so Legend of Zelda does that to a certain extent, but you have so many tools at your disposal that I think you wind up just using, one or two skill sets or whatever, and then you just kind of don't focus on the rest until some game session where you're taking the time to like look all that stuff up. Interesting thing is that so third person action game combat systems was almost our discussion topic for tonight, and that time spent in Mordor was definitely a catalyst for that.
DB, you want to go ahead?
Sure. Yeah, I don't have a third-person action game to talk about, but I do. It was football weekend kickoff, right? So I played a little bit of Madden. Still have not used up my 10 hours of the EA Access trial, which probably means that as other games come out this fall, I might be holding off on picking up Madden 18, which would be just fine, because if I hold off long enough, it'll show up in the vault, and I'll just keep enjoying my free games, or at least my multiple games for $30 with EA Access. An update on Destiny 2. Gentlemen, last week, Swiss quizzed me at the end if I was going to go out and buy Destiny 2 or if I was going to hold off. And I can say that I canceled my pre-order. I physically went into a store on release day to cancel my pre-order at GameStop, because I had pre-ordered the physical version with all the trinkets and stuff like that. And then I waited and I watched, and I picked up Destiny 2 yesterday. But I picked it up used from GameStop, and because I had a 20% off coupon for a used game, I picked up Destiny 2 for $38. And if I trade it back in within the first month, I'll get at least $30 back for it. So I may be playing the story of Destiny 2 on PlayStation 4 for $9, because I still have my PC pre-order, and I'm going to hold to my PC pre-order because, man, I now playing it on a controller and mouse, keyboard and mouse, and going back to controller, it took me a little bit to get used to again.
When does that come out on PC? Next week?
The PC version is the 24th or 26th of October. So
So I have definitely heard that the definitive version and the overall best version is the version on PC.
In terms of frames, right? I mean, I think it depends on if you're thinking about content, where the PlayStation version is going to have the extra strike, the extra exotic, the extra, emblems, or there's a couple legendary weapons. So if you're that type of, if you're playing Destiny for the stuff, for the loot, then PlayStation ranks up there. I think if you're playing it for the shooting, then it's hard to beat 30 or 60 frames or more, right? That some people, depending on their rig, Zeus, I would guess your rig could go, push up over 120, frames as well. So yeah, I'm going to be, I couldn't resist kind of finding out a little bit more about the story, and I'm only maybe 2 hours in, and my heart was, the story sucked me in after the initial mission that we've all played through the demo, through the beta, but I'm still I'm not so sure about the story, actually. So I'm going to hold off a little bit longer to see. So, but Zeus, I know you picked it up, Prime. You haven't, but now here's your chance. Can I convince you that there may be something here for you?
Well, I was just going to ask, did you play a lot of the multiplayer on the first Destiny?
So I did, but I mainly did in order to get gear, right?
So I guess I would say we might want to specify or classify that as Crucible or co-op.
Oh, well, yeah.
Yes.
Sure.
So the PvP, right?
Okay.
So I played I played a significant. I played enough to unlock Thorn back when it was still good, during the first year of Destiny, right? I had unlocked Thorn, I had unlocked, Pocket Infinity, a couple others, all those, Crucible, Bad Juju, the different exotic bounties that you had to have X number of kills with a certain weapon type. So I played enough there, but so is it a question of if I'm interested in? I have not played any PvP yet for Destiny 2.
Okay, I was just wondering.
Yeah. I mean, I truthfully, in a week from now, it may have sucked me in enough that I'll be right back into, my hamster wheel of Destiny, and I'll be okay with that. But there's not to nerd out any further on this podcast because we've already hit our 60 minutes, but I think there is what the promise of the Destiny world that it hinted at, and this is a much tighter story. It's certainly it's a well-told story, but the scope is a whole lot more narrower than what was alluded to within the first 2 years of Destiny.
Interesting. So it's just there's nothing just sucking you in for, at least as of right now. Now, how long have you played it?
2.5 hours. Right, so enough to kind of just start to, not even enough. I'm not, I have not unlocked all the other stuff yet, right? So there's plenty more to do. I think if you enjoyed Destiny, you're really going to enjoy Destiny 2. I think in your case, Prime, if what Destiny was didn't hook you, I don't know that Destiny 2 is going to do that any further for you.
Yeah, I mean, it did hook me when I was playing. I mean, I loved the game. I was playing mostly the multiplayer at the time. So, but it was just that when they started taking stuff out, that just kind of soured me. That was it. I mean, I like I've always said, the mechanics were always solid. I love the mechanics, and just graphically, obviously, it looked good. I'm sure it looks better now since there's
it's beautiful, and the music is amazing. I mean, it's created a great world to go and shoot aliens in.
Yeah, there's no last gen holding it back now, so they could have just ramped it all up. I mean, I don't know. I'll probably pick it up maybe eventually, when it goes on sale or something. So we'll see.
Yeah, but I mean, really, it's Zeus, when you open it and start playing, the first couple of missions, it really does a good job of drawing a player in. It definitely feels built around welcoming new players. I think that there's There is some nice touches, as people have said, in terms of what it does if you played previously. But it jumps you right into a conflict. You get your delayed title screen after the initial mission. There's lots of storytelling aspects that it puts a really good package together. I was playing it at a time, after the city has fallen. Right, these aren't spoilers because it all is out there in terms of it was in the beta. Right after that mission, it was definitely kind of, it sucks you in and draws you into that world. So it's effective in that way.
Yeah. So no, I did play a little bit of the beta. So just like story, like you mentioned, the demo. Not know if it was just me, but it really reminded me of the first Halo, where you got the Pillar of Autumn, it's getting attacked, and everything's going all around on you. And that's what the first thing I thought of when I started playing that first level, or tutorial level, if you want to call it that. So I don't know. It might have just been me.
Yeah, no, I could see that, right? I mean, it creates a sense of conflict and urgency right from the get-go. And there is right after that, there are some Halo moments as well where you've lost some of your power, and it's a little more somber afterward too. So it goes from really bombast and exciting to something that is a little more emotionally down and downtrodden because of where the story beats are at that moment.
Cool. Yeah, it'll be interesting to hear more from you and Zeus once he starts playing it. So just get your impressions on it. So, but for now, it looks like that'll be the end of episode number 13. Zeus, is there anything you want to plug? I think you have a new show out there right now, don't you?
So you can call that, maybe we just call it a hobby. I don't know. So Dave Pecci and I, having wrapped up our assignment on Dark Matter Season 3, have shifted over to our next podcast in the entertainment series entitled Nights in a Kitchen. And if you need any explanation on that,
It's a cooking show, right?
Cooking Mama. So, yeah, so it's a play on words because I view the characters that have been assembled on the Defenders, which the podcast is about, are kind of more akin to what I thought of, what I have always believed was the subject matter of the Marvel Knights comic book series. So there's your Knights, and then most of the story of the Defenders takes place in Hell's Kitchen, so you get Knights in a kitchen. So that's what we've titled it. We're discussing the Netflix original series, The Defenders. We're doing 2 episodes per show, so we've done 2 shows. The first one was episodes 1 and 2. The second one was episodes 3 and 4. I think episode 3. Well, like I said, we'll have episodes 3 and 4, and those will cover the last 2 of the Netflix original series. And so we're about halfway. So now's a good time to jump on. I actually had notes last time, so it was a little less of a random fest than the first episode was.
Nice. And as always, we have our Thursday night news show at 9 o'clock, or 10 o'clock Eastern Time, 9 o'clock Central. Well, we're talk about the news that we've brought out, or that we've saw over the last week or so, and then obviously come back here next week for another Enough to Keep Going, episode number 14. And on behalf of myself, Osiris Prime, Agascles Stamos, and DBQ Hams, we will see you next time.